socially radical, socially radical, socially radical. Socially radical, socially radical, socially radical. Guitarist. Hey everyone, welcome to Socially Radical Guitarist, another episode. Um, so the song you heard just now was Bird Problems Quailia from the EP Beyond the Nest. So as you can see, there's a lot of diverse and beautiful music in Canada, especially from Bird Problems in Quebec. Like very good from Montreal. So today we're doing something different. The first half of the show will have a guest, and the guest is Christopher Townsend. He's a local music teacher from Guelph. His family also owns a music store, from what I understand. Still owns it.
Used to.
Used to. So, yeah, like we're just going to get into his history, how he became a guitarist, and a little bit of like how he established his teaching career, and try to get people in the area to go, because he knows his music. He definitely knows his music. um yes.
Hey,
Hello.
Christian. It's great to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. um yeah, great. It's great to have you come on, especially after our exams. We're both doing a class actually, so that's how we met.
It's
So
been a hell of a day, and yeah, a hell of a month, really. But yeah, I'm getting through it, and yeah, I, I I have felt like music has kind of been in the shadow of the mountain this last long little while. I barely even get a chance to even practice these much days. So, but yeah, sunny days are here again. We're going to start doing more music as the summer goes on here.
oh yeah, that's good.
Mhm.
Just get a little bit started with growing up in the like in, growing up basically in a music store. Your parents owning a music store, and having a little bit of a conflict with some of the bigger players. What was going on there with that?
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, you're right. I did grow up in a music store. My parents owned a music store. They opened it when I was about 15, so I wasn't like really little. But yeah, I had it for many years, 20 years actually. But it was a tiny community. We had a music store called Townsend Strings and Things. It was in Bridgewater, Nova Scotia, a population of about 8,000 people. We were about 100 kilometers from any actual city. So we were very much a focus of the local community. Like it was just nothing like a decent, nice big music store anywhere else around. But unfortunately, yeah, because we were that 100 kilometers away, and most people, like when they're from a small town, they're used to going into the city for making runs for everything else anyway. So yeah, we did feel like we were at odds with. Well, I guess it was at first Music Stop when we got started, and then it would have been Long and McQuaid after they acquired them. So yeah, it's funny. I now, because I've been in that mindset so long of being in competition with Long and McQuaid. Now when I go there, because I need to get my strings, and yeah, I'm a musician. I need to go to like the local music store all the time. A lot of times I'll actually go to the local alternative first, just because I want to see what are the little guys doing. Have they got the stuff? Do they have like really good service? The chances are they've got what I need anyway. I'm not very fussy. But yeah, there's been lots of times when I've had to go to Long and McQuaid because they've got the most stuff they can get. So I have to kind of like eat crow, at least spiritually. Like it's something in my brain that sometimes I'll have to stamp down the feelings of having had those 20 years where they were kind of like the bad guys, and now, yeah, we're pals now, I guess. But yeah, growing up in a music store was actually amazing. I did learn to play guitar at a fairly young age, but maybe not as young as you. I would have started maybe about 16, 17, so that's, pretty tender years. But it wasn't my first instrument. Actually, piano has always been my first and main instrument. And I got into guitar by doing actually bass first. So I went piano, bass, and then guitar. It was just a natural progression because I found that I could just learn the fingerings of bass a little easier. I've never had a very good time playing guitar as a lead player or as like a finger style player. I've always been more of a rhythm player, and so coming through it from like doing piano chords and doing bass, I have always felt of guitar as very much like a personally like a rhythm instrument. So yeah, no, I've had fun with it that way, and that was kind of my path to it. So.
Oh, okay, interesting. So do you see it exclusively as a rhythm instrument, or do you see that there's other things you can do with it? Like personally, the way you play, how do
Mm.
you see it?
Personally, I do actually mostly use it as a rhythm instrument when I'm sitting around at home just playing around. Yeah, I'll fiddle with the odd ditty, but it'll be mostly just maybe a melody line here or there. I don't concentrate on like learning all the parts of songs. Yeah, I mostly just want to have a little backing thing. If I want to have a lead line or something, I might go play it on piano or any instrument. It doesn't even matter. But yeah, I've actually never made guitar a personal focus. I've always found it as the instrument that you need to know when you don't have any other instruments. It's so popular, it's so pervasive in the culture. As like just an instrumentalist of any sort, it's kind of like just knowing a handful of chords and at least a little bit of music theory, so you kind of know, okay, well, when I'm gonna bar, I should go up such and such this fret just to hit these notes, just enough that if somebody hands you a guitar, you don't sit there like a dummy. Because for me, growing up, music was always like a very grassroots thing. Like it was always just people would be sitting around a campfire, or they would just be in a kitchen, or they'd be at a jam, and sometimes you didn't even know you were going to be there. Like sometimes you didn't even know that anyone was going to have an instrument, so you wouldn't have brought anything. So yeah, it'd be nice to just kind of pass the guitar around and have just have some fun times. Just be able to pound out like something people can recognize. It doesn't even matter if it's good. Like nobody really cares. So yeah, it was for me a very a social thing. Like it wasn't so much like a personal focus for like musical growth. It was more just the low hanging fruit of I just want to play and I just want to like have friends and be a musician with other people. So it's just the guitar's there. So just do something with it. It doesn't even matter. Just do something. Just have it there and play. So.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely in the culture, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think um, people have been traveling around with like stringed instruments, like even back when they were during the chordophone days, as early as the 12th century in Europe, and they traveled around with similar instruments in Asia and in, like Japan as well. So it's part of the culture. It's ingrained in maybe every human being to just see that instrument and have an instinct to do something with it.
Oh
Whether
yeah.
it's
Again, having the experience of working at a music store, I know that like these days for sure, like within like the last 10 or 15, 20 years, you'll sell probably 10 times as many guitars as almost any other instrument. I wish it were otherwise. Actually, it'd be kind of nice if we sold more basses and more recorders and more pianos and everything else. But no, like for sure. I guess the only thing that actually comes close to it right now maybe is ukulele, just because they're so cheap. A lot of people buy them now anyway. So, I mean, that's basically a tiny guitar. It's all good. But yeah, they are far and away like one of the most popular instruments. Like no, bar none.
Mhm. So, what got you into becoming a teacher, like a music teacher, and what do you teach musically to your students?
Yeah, right on. Um, well, I started teaching as just kind of a short term thing. I'm actually not entirely sure that I'm a really good teacher, but it was necessity was the mother of invention. I just needed a job. I knew I was really good at music, so I just thought, well, I'll just try my hand at it. I did really enjoy it. What I taught was ukulele lessons. I started actually through an online service called GoBoomerang. They're out of Toronto, and yeah, they do all of the advertising, marketing. They have a really nice website made up. They basically do all the work. But yeah, they just hired me as a teacher for them. They had never had a music teacher before. They'd always had lessons for yoga or how to plant your potted plants, or you know, beginners photography. It was just like an online like lessons course with no specific focus. So when I got there, they really didn't know how music lessons worked. I kind of had to make my own, uh, well, everything, I guess. I had to make my own materials. I had to make my own scheduling. Then when I really figured out how to teach lessons online at that point. So yeah, it was kind of a trial and error process. And if I had to do it over, I might make a couple of changes, but I was pretty proud of what I did. Mostly it just consisted of like an hour lesson, group lesson, so maybe 20 people in it, half an hour to start getting everybody tuned up, answering questions from the last time, just seeing how people made out with practicing, and then another half an hour at the end being wrapping up again, answering more questions. People were just like, oh, I didn't get what you had during this lesson. So it was actually kind of grueling. I had 2-hour blocks where I would be half hour intro, hour lesson, and then half hour kind of like wrapping up. So it was a very grueling format, and I might change that around to maybe like an hour lesson where the 15 minutes at the start is tuning up, and then the last 15 minutes is answering questions, and then I have a half hour lesson. But we haven't got that far. It's actually kind of been the first stab at it that I've had just this past spring. So I've yet to kind of refine the process, but people were really grateful though. I was surprised. There was a lot of people that were getting into ukulele that hadn't really played much of any music before, and that's kind of why I picked this instrument, because I knew that people will kind of respond to the ukulele as a beginner's thing. It's very accessible. They're super cheap, so anybody can just like walk into a music store. $50 later, they're walking out with actually something pretty good, like something playable, which you can't really say for a guitar. Like to get anything even remotely playable, it's pretty much closer to like 4 times that. So it was very much keeping an eye on getting people in, getting people interested, getting people playing that hadn't played before. And I really enjoyed seeing people really respond to it, because they didn't know that they could do this. Like they didn't know that they could just pick up an instrument. They'd never tried, or some had tried and never really got anywhere with it. So I got super great feedback. It was actually super rewarding, and I am tempted to go teach again now, having had that experience, because I thought it would just be all work. I didn't realize how like just spiritually rewarding and fulfilling it would be. So I really enjoyed it.
Oh, okay. So all your courses were online during the spring,
Yep.
and they're probably going to have to stay online at least until the end of the year, right?
I imagine so. And in fact, there's probably a good reason to be staying online anyway, because you'll always get students, and it is kind of nice to talk to people from far away and share stuff. For example, I can play music that's like from where I'm from, like East Coast, maybe like fiddle music, for example, that doesn't necessarily get a whole lot of attention in other areas of the country or the world. And I can share that with them. And because my student is flowing in through the internet, they can learn it in BC, and they would have never had a chance to like see someone play this live, just because it's not going to be quite easily accessible for them. So yeah, I was super glad to have that aspect of it, because you get to now like have new things you can share that are interesting and new, that would just like if you did it just out of your own house, of course people would already know it, because it was already kind of in the culture.
Yeah, I'm hoping more people get the ukulele if they're feeling like playing instruments, because it is cheap, like you said, $50. So.
Yeah, and that's for a pretty good one. Like I said, you can probably spend less and still have something you can play.
Yeah. So like if you do start having local lessons, where do you generally teach?
I prefer to teach in a studio. I really like supporting local music stores. Most of them will have lessons there in them. I think you have advantages that way, because you've got discoverability. As you as a teacher, you kind of have people that are coming in and out, and they'll see other lessons that maybe guitar didn't work out well for them, so maybe they'll try drums, because there's a drum teacher right there. They can keep going in the same place. But Yeah, I know a lot of music teachers do teach just out of their own homes. I've talked to a few that works really well for them. Some have actually started with a studio or with a music store or something like that, and then ended up going home because they could make it work better for them that way. But personally, I really work best in a studio. Like I really like having just the feeling of like going to a place where music is the focus. I find that gets me kind of in the zone. Teaching music from home didn't really ever feel like I was really in the teacher sort of mode or mood. A lot of times it was just like sitting around and just kind of explaining the stuff, but I didn't really feel like I was on as an instructor. So yeah, if I had the option, if I could do it all over, yeah, I would definitely go teach in a music store, or like I say, in a place where lessons are just like standard, something they always have. I think that just suits me better as just like a player who wants to really do stuff. But yeah, sorry, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It does. It does. It really does. Now, I think we'll close up with this last question before we, go into the interlude and then the next segment. Just wondering, um, your the give us a little bit of more info on the animosity you had with Long when you quit it. Like you told me about it before when we were hanging out, but I want people to hear what basically they did with the supply chains for the local store and things like that. Just so people have that understanding what happened.
Christian, you're going to get me in trouble. You're going to get me wound up, aren't you? I can see this coming. Uh, Absolutely, and yeah, it is actually kind of infuriating sometimes. The uh, the big players in any industry are always pushing around the little players. That's a story as old as time. I don't need to tell you. Happens not just in music, but yeah, it happens in music too. I'll just give you a quick little anecdote because I know this is something that's kind of near and dear to my heart, and that's a lot of times independent music stores will have long working relationships with certain suppliers. They'll order in their instruments from, say, like a big corporation that's multinational, and they're the itty bitty little player, but they've been doing it forever. They've been working 20, 50 years. I actually have personally like shopped at music stores where they almost go back 100 years. Like some of them are really quite something. So what ends up happening is you get to know the supplier as a vendor, and you kind of have a working relationship, and you kind of build that up. And then the big stores, the box stores, or the ones that have like 100 shops across the country, they'll walk in and they'll start telling those suppliers, well, we buy from you too, and we don't want you selling your product through the little shops because we want to have all of the customers come to us. So they set up exclusivity agreements with the suppliers, and they do very often shut out the little guys. It's happened 100 times. I've seen, for example, music stores that I've worked at, we can sell Roland amplifiers, but we can't sell Roland pianos because the music store across the street is bigger than us, and they've got Roland pianos, and they don't want anybody else selling the Roland pianos. I don't know why we can get the amps, but we can't get the pianos. And stuff like uh, band instruments, something that's really big contract, because usually your supplier will be guys like Yamaha or Boozy and Hawks, where they sell probably a dozen different kinds of instruments. They sell thousands of them probably a year because they have supplier to schools. It's huge contracts. Like these are make or break things. It actually happened to a music store in Halifax. Buckley's Music was supplying all of the regional schools with their band contracts, like the rentals for the schools for like saxophones and trumpets and all that stuff. It was huge. Like it was half their business. Long McQuaid walks in and say, Yamaha, you can't supply to these people anymore, or we're going to stop selling them. We're going to go to Boozy and Hawks or whatever, and we're going to start pushing those instruments instead. Yamaha slams on the brakes, says, okay, Buckley's, you can't sell these or rent them anymore because we're not going to supply any longer. And 2 years later, the business folds. It's that simple. I've seen it. It's absolutely incredible what kind of power these big companies wield. and it will just break a music store in no time plan. It's really sad, and as it happens, Buckley's was the music store I was thinking of that had been in operation continuously like 80 years. It wasn't even just like they'd been through everything. They'd been through literally world wars, and nothing could break them. But Long and McQuaid could break them because it's all money. No, it's not fair. But I've seen it happen. I don't really want to end the thing on a long note, so I'm going to end maybe with this. The little guys aren't gone. They're still there. I still support them, even in little cities where I'm in now, where there is a Long and McQuaid. There's like 3 or 4 other little music stores. I would go to them first. I would go to them always. Check out their stuff. Sometimes, even if they don't have exactly what you have in mind, chances are they'll have something close. I think it's worth changing, like brand of strings, or sometimes even just like a kind of instrument that you thought was, well, it's not great, but it's still good. I would support the little guys. I would buy from them first every time.
Yes. That's a little bit of activism you can do as a musician. A lot more needs to be done to deal with that kind of situation, because you can't have the whole lifeblood of a family just disappearing like that from predatory.
It happens.
So yeah, thanks for bringing that up, and thanks for leaving the show on a long note. We're going to be going into the intermission with a song that Chris picked. So what is the name of the song, Chris?
The name of the song is I Am the Ride, and it's by Chris Smither. It's a 90s tune, kind of a blues folk piece. I really love the finger style. It's like very guitarists loving guitarists sort of song. And I love the lyrics too. It's got a really deep meaning. It really took me by surprise. Like one of those songs that I heard it for the first time. It's like, holy cow, that really makes me think, as well as really gets my toe tapping. So it's got a lot of things going for it.
It's an excellent review if I ever heard it. So we're going to be going out with Chris Smithers' I Am the Ride. And after that, we'll be going into our political segment. So stay tuned.
Forms are loosely fitting, juries still are sitting, and a sense of duty keeps us all in motion. Prison sirens wailing that security is failing do not inspire a lifetime of devotion. No one will sympathize, no one really tries. They need a faith that leads them like a drum. I can hear it pounding down among the ruins. Sad to say, I don't think I'm the only one. I awoke, someone spoke and asked me in a whisper if all my dreams and visions had been answered. I don't know what to say, I never even pray, I just feel the pulse of universal dancer. They'll waltz me till I die and never tell me why. I've never thought to ask them where we're going. The holy and profane, all helplessly the same, wishful, hopeful, never really knowing. asked if I believe, and do the angels really grieve? Or is it all a comforting invention? It's like gravity, I said, it's not a product of my head. It doesn't speak, but nonetheless commands attention. I don't care what it means, who decorates the scenes. The problem is more with a sense of pride that keeps me thinking me instead of what it is to be. I'm not a passenger, I am the ride. I'm not a passenger, I am the ride.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Socially Radical Guitarist. So the song you heard just now on Chris Townsend's choice was Chris Smither and his song I Am the Ride from his album Up on the Lowdown. Very good song. He kind of shows that with enough skill, the guitar by itself can be a complete rhythm instrument. And he really showcases that skill very well. I'm glad Chris Townsend picked that song. So, getting into why I wanted to have him on as a guest is because, well, one, I wanted to let people in the area know about what he does, and I also because he had talked about his experiences coming out of what Marxists would call a petty bourgeois family and dealing with the predations of monopoly capitalism. When he talked about that story enough, and he talked about how small stores are constantly getting beaten down by the bigger guys, that's actually an indication of a socialist issue. It's good to highlight this story to help deal with two major myths that I think are unacceptable to continue to be propagated against communists. The first myth is that the communists are anti-small business. There's not a single socialist state in the world that bans small businesses. Not even North Korea. North Korea, there's actually special economic zones where people can trade and do small business activity. In fact, that's also the case in Cuba. Blockade in when Marco Rubio was saying that regular people can always get stuff from the United States. That was a lie, because Cuba hasn't banned small cooperatives or even small business owners from operating. They've initiated a lot of the anti-dogmatic reforms that China implemented. So their excuses for paralyzing Cuba are not based in reality. Another myth that I wanted to deal with was the myth that communists want to eradicate Western culture. Now, that myth is only really half true. We see distinction within Western culture. Bourgeois culture will plead guilty to wanting to eradicate without question. I'll plead guilty to that, no problem. Western proletarian culture is not something we want to eradicate. And I actually highlight and emphasize that with this show. Think about how many episodes we've had so far. So far, we've had 6. In those last 6 episodes alone, 18 songs. All separate, different artists. I've not played a single artist twice. So 18 artists. Music spanning over 20 years. A lot of it Western. And it's all passed you by. But think about the nature of the music. I'm highlighting the guitar, I'm emphasizing the guitar, and guitar playing is a highly proletarian cultural instinct. Basically going back to the Middle Ages in the 12th century, where vagabonds, peasants would travel around playing chordophones. It's ingrained in the proletariat and the working classes of Western culture and a lot of cultures around the world. But think about that. 18 different songs, 18 different artists, music that I've highlighted, music that could basically have passed all of you by. Music that isn't getting its due, that isn't emphasized by the contemporary culture. But a lot of that music uses as its base an instrument that the Western proletariat in particular likes to use. And that kind of also extends into the problems that Christown emphasized with how monopoly capitalism tries to crush small businesses. And first thing I'm going to do is dismantle the myth about, if that, libertarians perpetuate that if you make it a free market in the free sense that capitalism will work in the way that it should. There are 2 presuppositions to free market economics and how it's supposed to work in order for supply to meet demand. And that's basically when everybody's needs are met. And the presupposition is that it's a perfectly competitive market, and when the market is perfectly competitive, all the objects being sold are essentially somewhat similar. And in that particular scenario, that generally precludes intellectual property rights. But intellectual property rights are the basis for the thinking behind capitalism, that you own property, whatever's made on that property is yours, whatever ideas are come up with are yours. And that's really the basis of capitalism. And the thinking about it is private ownership of the means of production. And when you think about that, you realize that with an intellectual property presupposition, there's no way that every object is going to be in circulation within the market is going to be the same. Some corporations are going to have an inherent advantage after coming up with that concept or that idea. There are going to be oligopolies, and as a consequence of oligopolies, you're going to end up with a demand surplus, which is what we're seeing around the world. That's why there are millions of people, billions of people around the world whose needs are not being sufficiently met. And then you go and realize what actually would constitute a free market and what conditions would come with a free market. And that ends up being a market socialist economy where the intellectual property is under the stewardship of the state, or under, the conservatorship of the state. And the state is also actively competing in the sale of products. So that's a market socialist economy, like what's happening in Vietnam and China and North Korea and Cuba. And those are the situations in which there's actually a free market. So that kind of ends up exposing that idea. And yeah, now going into like the culture issue. When you look at all of the music that just passed you by, all of the music that I'm able to play, like earlier songs from 2014, some are newer, like the one from Bird Problems, but the last 18, like old songs that maybe nobody's ever even heard of. And all that music disappeared. All of that culture suppressed, eradicated. And did the communists do it? Are the communists in charge of the record companies? Are the communists in charge of the radio stations? Other than maybe this one, I've only got the one public radio station in my area. This was all done by the bourgeoisie. It is the bourgeoisie that is eradicating Western proletarian culture. We see cultural propagation as another arena for class struggle as communists. And that's the correct way to see it. Especially when you see what is going on and you understand why the vast majority of people were ashamed of themselves on July 1st. You see the bourgeoisie, the nobility that came here, sought to completely eradicate and destroy cultures and destroy anyone that was perpetuating that culture. That's why they ended up destroying whole societies that were diametrically opposed to the bourgeois conceptions of property. And during that whole process, you can see the nobility trying to conceal that crime from the masses. As early as, the 1900s, they were manipulating the statistics on the indigenous population, saying that there were only a few 100,000 here, which was nonsense. Most conservative, rational estimate would say that there were hundreds of thousands of indigenous throughout the entire Turtle Island continent. And even in Canada itself, there would have to have been millions. So there's no way there were 100,000 here. That's just nonsense. And that's really what they were doing. It wasn't just that they didn't feel like they could be a lot of them, because they relied on them for military alliances. That's how many there were. When the British needed to defeat the French, they relied on the Iroquois. That's because they were numerous. There were many of them. Especially the French, they allied with the Algonquin because there were millions of them. Millions and upon millions of these people. And that's the reality we all face. The system as it's set up, as it is mass producing music that perpetuates bourgeois cultural ideology. Get as much money as you can, screw the rest, look after yourself, and Sleep with as many people as you can. Forget commitment to any single person or forming meaningful relationships. Those are the general ideology. That's the general message of bourgeois music, really, which is what it is. That's the music that's promoted and perpetuated. It's bourgeois music. And all of this proletarian music with a different message, or even just music that emphasizes an instrument that the proletariat likes to use in the West and basically around the world, has been actively suppressed. And now it's communists bearing the brunt of this accusation that we are trying to eradicate Western culture. That's only half true. The bourgeois culture we have, and I have no problem confessing to wanting to eradicate bourgeois culture. But proletarian culture is what I'm actively promoting on this show. And it is the bourgeoisie that is trying to suppress it, along with the other cultures that they've eradicated and destroyed. The vast majority of the proletariat felt shame and indignant at their own country on July 1st. And there's a reason for that. And because there's an awakened consciousness that identifying the culture of the bourgeoisie and the bourgeoisie which this state is designed to defend is vastly distinct from Western proletarian culture. There's a vast and significant distinction. And that's what capitalism does itself. It's itself a revolutionary force, as the Christian anarchist Chris Hedges would like to say. It's a revolutionary force. It has a revolutionary character over feudalism, basically feudalism. That mode of production. And that's why they killed so many people advocating and espousing primitive communism. And I'm always going to remind people of the number as soon as I get a new number. Last time I checked, it was about 5,505 children found in mass graves. I'm going to remind you of that because you took us for a ride. Really. Well, not you necessarily, but the country definitely took us for a ride. Took my parents for a ride when we came here, saying there were not going to be mass graves. And yes, with the musician coming up next is another person you took for a ride. Came from the same country, the same incident. And it was pretty bad because I was a year old when it happened. I had no idea. I fought cholera when I was a year old. Survived that. But I didn't know what I was doing. Maybe I was just consciously thinking I didn't want my mom to cry, and that was it. But he was 17 when he saw his parents killed right in front of him. In 1994. From the Rwandan genocide. And the current sitting president, which Justin Trudeau likes to promote as an inspiration for good governance, participated in the genocide against the Tutsi when he invaded Uganda, invaded Rwanda from Uganda. He was killing off Tutsi in spite for them having supported the revolutionary government. He's a descendant of a monarch that was there before the monarchy that was kicked out during the original Rwandan revolution for independence and for republicanism. But when he came back in order to reclaim his throne, he killed his spiteful subjects in northern Rwanda and participated in that genocide there and engaged in agent provocateur tactics by infiltrating the Habyarimana militia and destabilizing Kigali further so it was easier to invade. So, in all aspects, taken for a ride. And the musician I'm talking about is Corneille. And if you haven't heard of him, think about that for a minute. He comes here, is taken for a ride. He does his music industry, and he's only really there in Quebec, hasn't really launched. So that's also something to think about as we end this show. And as I highlight Corneille from the album Parce qu'on vient de voir, the song is going to be Seul au Monde, which in English means alone in the world. And I'm sure all of you can imagine why, because he does mention his mother. So with that, we're going to end the show and see you next week. Socially radical. Socially radical. Socially radical. Socially radical. Socially radical. Socially radical. Guitarist.
D'où je viens? Très loin. Où je vais? Personne ne le sait. En attendant, je vous dis où je suis. On dit souvent que j'ai l'air d'avoir tout pour moi, mais c'est sans savoir. Les fantômes qui me hantaient, les requiems que je me chante. Je joue dur chaque jour qui passe, et les pierres de chaque mur un jour se cassent. Je suis peut-être la roche qu'on croit, mais je suis plus fragile que je veux qu'on voit. Maman m'a dit avant de partir, montre jamais tes faiblesses, et dans le pire, reste fort, avale tes larmes, car ta fierté restera ta plus belle âme. Donc je sais rire quand il le faut, mais faut pas croire, je craque dès qu'on tourne le dos. Je marche droit pour ne pas plier, d'ailleurs je chante souvent pour ne pas crier. Quand je pense à ma vie, je fais face à mes nuits. Chaque jour qui se lève me dit que je suis seul au monde. Y'a rien à faire, je suis seul au monde. Je peux plus le taire, je suis seul au monde. Je me sens seul au monde. J'ai Noël et toutes ces bêtes fêtes de famille et tout ce qui rappelle ma plus belle vie. Je suis jaloux de vous les chanceux qui prenez votre chair et votre sang pour acquis. J'ai horreur de votre pitié, je prends très mal votre générosité. Ça fait déjà un bout que je me suffis, C'est pas vrai mais pour être fort, c'est ça que je me dis. Quoi qu'il arrive, faut que je reste dans mon rôle. Quoi qu'il arrive, faut pas que je perde le contrôle. Je pense à moi avant le reste du monde, car avec les années je me suis rendu compte que si c'est pas moi, ce sera personne. Pas lui, pas toi, ni personne. Et si ben c'est chacun pour soi, pour les pauvres et fiers solitaires comme moi. Quand je pense à ma vie, seul face à mes nuits, chaque jour qui se lève me dit que je suis seul au monde. Y'a rien à faire, je suis seul au monde. Je peux plus le faire, je suis seul au monde. Je me sens seul.